You're listening to Metal Matters, a weekly Gimme Radio podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hill. If you like metal, punk, hardcore, or anything extreme, you've come to the right place. So subscribe and never miss out. Hello, everybody. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone who's been sharing the episodes. It really means a lot to me. I see you out there sharing these things, and I'm really excited. It means to me that you guys are enjoying this, and you're thinking enough of the show to let other people know about it. And once again, thank you. It's much appreciated. This week's guest, Ryan Patterson, is somebody that I've known for, over 25 years. That's a long time to know somebody. I've been a fan of Ryan's music ever since I met him. Prior to doing Fotocrime, he was in a band called Coliseum, which has records out on Relapse, Level Plane, Deathwish, and Temporary Residence. They've toured the world. If you haven't seen them, you definitely missed out. They're one of the best live bands I've ever seen. Ryan's new band, Fotocrime, is a departure from the brutal, ferocious punk rock intensity of Coliseum. He's taken a very different approach to his new music. Ryan and I are great friends. This conversation was really easy. I look forward to every time I get a chance to talk to Ryan. He was a guest on my other podcast, Everything Went Black. If you're not familiar with that, you can find that pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And if you like this interview, check out the interview we did on Everything Went Black earlier this year. It was great seeing you in Denver, albeit for a sort of abbreviated visit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, things get crazy sometimes. They get a little chaotic. And I just wish we had more time to spend together.
Yeah, I agree, man. Yeah, it was good to see you in Denver, and it was very quick. Like, the whole experience of, like, flying into a show and playing and trying to see people and everything is just, like, kind of head spinning. So I was happy we got a minute, at least.
More importantly, or equally as important, I got a chance to see you perform live, which is something that I've failed to do up until that point. And I quite enjoyed the show. I thought it was amazing, and it lived up to all of my expectations that I had for seeing Fotocrime play live.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's great to hear.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've known you for over 25 years, I think, at this point, or at least 20 years.
Seems like it. Yeah, I'd say so.
And, I've been very, I've been a fan of all the musical output that you've done. And I think that with each thing that you've done, there's been like a different sort of take on it, but it still sounds like your own voice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah. And Fotocrime being your newest endeavor, I feel still has your Ryan Patterson characteristic, but it's definitely like a different look compared to the other bands that you've done. But before we get into all that stuff, this gig that we were talking about was the Electric Funeral Festival out in Denver, Colorado, which was primarily a doom metal sort of thing. And Fotocrime is definitely not in that genre. So how was that to be playing, a festival that, may or may not have, it was questionable whether or not they would have gotten what you were doing or appreciated what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, it actually worked out really well. I think me being like the only, totally different band from everything else was actually worked out really well for me. I think it seemed like people were stoked to see something different, and I got a lot of reaction from the show. I think probably certainly more than I would have if it had just been like a day of all post-punk bands,
Yeah.
So I thought it was cool. Like that actually was my favorite time ever in Denver. I feel like I got a little more of a vibe of like the people there, and everybody at the club I played was cool, and the kid that did the fest was cool, and everything was really nice. And the reaction was good. I mean, I think with Coliseum, I always really was trying to fight off any categorization of us being a metal band, because that's not really something that I'm into or identify with personally, even though I like, some metal bands. But with Fotocrime, it like can't be categorized as that. So I don't really care where I play. Like it's kind of nice. Like I'll play with a metal band and do a record with a metal label or do anything like that. And it feels less like I don't know, putting myself in a corner I don't want to be in. So yeah, it was cool. And I didn't really think much about the fest either. Like somebody asked me to come play a show. I just looked cool and I did it. So it was great.
No, that's awesome. I mean, was he aware of Coliseum prior to that, or just aware of Fotocrime?
I really have no idea. Yeah, my agent booked the show and I saw that like you guys were playing and Torch and Val played the night before. So people I knew were playing and it seemed cool. I don't really know the promoters, how much he knew of Coliseum. And it's always interesting too. Like I don't make much about Coliseum with Fotocrime. I don't mention it a lot, in I don't know, in social media or whatever. So it's interesting when people find that out or didn't realize it or all that. It's kind of an interesting thing to see, and just how people are about old bands too, how people see Coliseum as being something that maybe it wasn't. I mean, people always think it was more popular than it was and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I get that same thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Actually, that point between Coliseum and Fotocrime, I always found that to be a very interesting point in your, musical career because, I've known, like I said earlier, I've known you for decades at this point, and I've seen you play in all these different bands. And, Tombs, our first show was with Coliseum, like way back when. And I've seen all the different incarnations of Coliseum perform. And towards the last couple of records you were doing, I noticed when you guys played with Coalesce, there was a gig in Brooklyn at Europa when Coliseum played with Coalesce. It was like a Coalesce reunion show. And you were performing, at the time it was new material. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, wow, this is like very interesting to me because it's different than anything you guys had done prior. And I was, it wasn't quite exactly maybe, it was new material. So it was still being fitted out in a lot of ways. And I was thinking about that influence. Like I almost, like felt this, Swerve Driver, like 90s, or late 80s kind of thing. I might be way off base by saying that, but that's to me what I was, starting to have more of like a quote unquote post-punk sort of like take on it. And that's definitely a direction that the band went in, I feel. And then, so I guess the big question for me is why end Coliseum and why start Fotocrime?
It's almost entirely about my perception and how I felt. I mean, to be frank, I miss the Fotocrime guys. The Coliseum guys, Carter and Kahan, the last members of the band. I mean, Carter was a drummer for the last like almost 10 years of the band. I'm still really close with them. We're in touch all the time, talking about movies and music and anything else. And I miss those guys a lot. And I maybe miss playing that music a little bit, but mainly Coliseum had been a band for so long that it was like in my head, the expectation of what things should be and the hopes of what things should be versus the reality was just always so vastly different. And I just couldn't enjoy it anymore. We played, I think the last time we played Brooklyn was in St. Vitus, and I think you were there.
Yeah, I was definitely there, yeah.
Yeah, and like, there were maybe 30, 40 people there, and that was, we've been a band for 12 years. We just put out our 5th album. It was on Deathwish. It was getting great press. We probably sold 1,000 shirts in Brooklyn alone over the 12 years of the band, and we're not even getting 100 people at our shows, and it just wore me out. We were working so hard for so long, and I think people took the band for granted because we worked so hard. I think people just didn't think it wasn't an event when when we came through, and we just never broke through. I mean, bands have to, it's like you and your friend and your friend's friend, like everybody has to go to a show for most people to want to go. It's like, it needs to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to see all my friends down at the show on Friday night. And that takes a lot. And a lot of bands don't ever break through to that kind of thing where it's like a social event or whatever. And maybe that's not even good when that happens, but yeah, Coliseum was just endless disappointment. And I couldn't see our successes. I couldn't be happy with it at all. So I just had to stop doing it. I just like, it was honestly making me super miserable and unhappy. And once I stopped that and started a new band with no expectation, and if there's one person at the show, if there's 100, I don't care. If there's something about Coliseum, I always was insecure about it. I always wanted people to like it, and I always felt, I don't know what it was. I just was never sure it was good or something. But with Fotocrime, I truly don't give a fuck. Like, I don't care if anybody likes it. I don't care what people think about it. If they like it, that's cool. But like, I have none of that bullshit that bogged me down with Coliseum, because it's new and there's nothing about it that is, there's no pressure. So, yeah, it just feels good. And that's the main reason to like enjoy music again and not worry about all the other bullshit.
Now you mentioned, now that there's been some time, can you see some of the successes that you had with the band? And if you could see those successes, what are they in your opinion?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're endless. I mean, Coliseum played just shy of 1,000 shows. We toured Japan, Australia twice, Europe 10 times, 5 albums, tons of EPs, a fucking split 7-inch with Superchunk. Like, we recorded with my heroes, played with my heroes, and our last shows with Soulside, which is one of the bands I grew up loving. Yeah, it was just unbelievable. We put out a lot of great music. I mean, I listen to it every once in a while just to kind of, from nostalgia perspective or whatever. And there's shit that Coliseum did that I think is fucking great. I mean, I think the last 2 albums, Sister Faith and Anxiety's Kiss, are fucking awesome. And I think God Damage is a pretty great hardcore record, So, yeah, we did a lot of stuff. I made a lot of friends. Endless amounts of things. So I see all that stuff now for sure. And yeah, I just couldn't see it otherwise. So, and I think I appreciate it more not doing it. And I don't know if we'll do it again. I mean, every once in a while we talk about it, but I don't have any drive to do that other than to see those guys and play music with them. Otherwise, I'm very happy, like, being out of the Coliseum mindset. But that's also like, kind of like we talked about last time, my physical changes, like all the changes in my life kind of have happened at the same time. So it's a lot easier for me to be happy and more content now than it was then.
That's awesome. And when you listen to, I guess the testament of whether or not something is good in your opinion, in your eyes, is when you go back and listen to it and it sounds like you don't get disgusted by it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, because that's kind of how I feel. Like, I go back and listen to music I did like 10, 15 years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, I start cringing and everything. So that the fact that you can still enjoy it is awesome. It means that there's definitely, quality there,
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, there's stuff that I hate that we did, and I try not to ever say publicly what that is, because I don't want to bum out anybody, something that they might like. But, and, there are moments that I'm like, oh, I could have done that better or whatever. But overall, I really like it, and I'm proud of it. And I think we accomplished what we attempted to do. And, yeah, so it's cool. I mean, it's weird, like, just erasing the blueprint. It just makes things easier. Something about like the way I sang in Coliseum, I felt like I was never comfortable. And with Fotocrime, like I was just kind of able to start from scratch and like find a voice that felt really comfortable and is easy to sing and feels good. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's cool, man. It's nice to be in that place.
Now you mentioned that you miss seeing those guys. Do you ever think about just playing together and doing something completely different with those the guys, the old Coliseum guys?
I've never thought about that, about like just doing a different band or something.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's not a bad idea. I did ask them, the tour that ended up being me solo, the first Fotocrime solo tour earlier this year in Europe. I did ask Carter and Kahan to do that tour with me because Carter's a great guitar player. He sings and plays guitar in a band called Null, and I asked him if he would play guitar and Kahan play bass or vice versa, and because the other people from Fotocrime couldn't do it, and I was like, how rad would it be if you guys were just in Fotocrime for this tour? But neither one of them could do it because they've kind of gotten into like a little more like legit life and work kind of scenarios. But I don't know. I mean, it's still there, and the problem is they live 5 hours away. They live in Birmingham, Alabama, and I live in Louisville, so it's not as easy as like, let's just meet up. So that's one of the downfalls. But as you know, that's like what happens when you're doing a long-term touring band. It's like eventually you just find the people, and geography is less important than finding the right person.
No, definitely. For sure that's the case. I mean, I wish that, well, actually our situation right now is pretty convenient, but there have been periods of time where we had a tour. We had members from Washington State, like,
yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we had to fly people in to do the tour and practice and stuff. And that's, it sounds like very rock star-ish, but sometimes that's the only way you can make things happen,
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm a solo artist right now, because that's just like through all this stuff in life, I'm like, well, this is how it's going to be. And Tombs has always been your thing. It's like trying to get other people to follow your dream and your mission for no money and no glory is like nearly fucking impossible. So I quickly felt like, well, I can't afford to pay anybody anymore, and I'm just going to do this myself, because it's unfortunately not that thing when you're like 20 and you and your best friend start a band. That just, as we get older, it just fades away.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, there's a little irony here because, after the Tombs being a band for over 10 years, finally, it doesn't feel like it's just my thing anymore because of the current lineup we have. Is very hands-on with the creative aspect of things, and we just recorded a bunch of songs for an EP that's coming out later this year, and everyone contributed in a way.
That's awesome.
With the songwriting and
yeah,
production ideas, like all that stuff. So it's like, to me, even though the band's been around for over 10 years at this point, it feels like a new band almost, and it's cool. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I felt that when I saw you guys, as I said in the text, like I felt like that was kind of the most cohesive I've seen the band, and like I don't know, it was really pummeling, and like everything just felt like it was, I don't know, just kind of like ripping in like just the perfect way. The best I'd seen you guys, I think.
Oh, thanks. But I want to talk about you. So,
all right.
We'll deflect those. Those are kind words, and I appreciate it. But everyone out that listens to this show at some point gets to hear me talk about my stuff. So,
all right.
But anyway, so there's been a couple, like you mentioned earlier, you played solo on the European tour you did, and when I saw you recently, it was just you up there. Yet there have been other incarnations of the band. We have other members. So just kind of take me through the beginning of Fotocrime, and your idea, your concept, and all that sort of stuff, and how you ended up playing with that band, that original lineup, and then how. And what the state is now. Is it going to be just you, or are you still going to have other musicians involved?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, when Coliseum ended in our last show was November 2015, and pretty much immediately I started writing music with the idea that it was initially going to be like a solo record, like in a more traditional, like solo artist way. And I was and am really influenced by Mark Lanegan, and especially like his last few records that were more electronic based, like Blues Funeral in particular, I really love, and Sparkle Horse and Portishead. And I was writing music like that was had electronic elements, but it had, I don't know, like maybe like too much of that kind of thing. And that's just, it was, I don't know, it just was not feeling like me. So I kind of like pushed the band and the sound into more of like a post-punk kind of thing, while still exploring like all the, you know, electronic elements and analog sequencers and synthesizers and all that stuff. And because I think initially I really wanted to be totally different from Coliseum, but then kind of ended up being almost just another step in that evolution. I mean, the, you know, Fotocrime songs could have been Coliseum songs in a way. So for about a year, I wrote on my own. For a very short time, my friend Will Allard, who's in a band called Xerxes, and he was in a project called Whips Chains with me. He for a little while he came in and played guitar, and when he was with me, he didn't write any songs, but then we started practicing the songs I was writing, and that really got the ball rolling for me. And that was like mid 2016. So at the beginning of 2017, I recorded 13 songs with Jay Robbins, and those I played all myself. So it's all programmed drums. I do all the programming and almost all the synth stuff at home, and then take that stuff to the studio and do all the guitar and bass and vocals and mixing.
Now, had you had experience doing that stuff prior to this?
I've been writing Coliseum demos with the drum machine for a long time. Like I actually, at some point a few years back, kind of went back and cataloged all those, and they were some as early as like No Salvation. Like there's a Coliseum song called Defeater. It's like a D-beat song, and I have a demo of that where it's just this extremely like basic 2-beat drum machine, like, and I wrote the whole song like from start to finish with that beat, and then from House with a Curse onward, I wrote a lot with drum machines and programming, and then would give that to the band and let them put their stamp on it, you know, and make them into real beats. So they were never really intended to be heard. But so by the time I started doing the Fotocrime stuff, I felt pretty comfortable with programming, and felt like if I put a little more effort into it and kind of focused on it as something that would be heard by people, I could make it work. And it did, yeah. So while I was in the studio recording, Brian Cook from Russian Circles asked me if I wanted to play a couple of shows with them. That was in February when I was recording, and the shows were in April. So I didn't have a band. I had a loose idea of how I would perform it live, but so I had to kind of get a band together really fast. So I asked Nick Fieneman, who is in Young Widows currently, and he also does a band called Fool's Ghost, and he and I have played music together for many years. He was in Black Cross and Black God and Breathe or Resist, his old band with my brother. We used to tour Coliseum and them all the time. So he's like a very like long-term, trusted, close, solid friend through music. So I asked him to play bass, and he asked to play guitar. So he started playing guitar, and then I asked this woman, Shelly Anderson, to play bass. She's been playing music around forever, and actually like used to intern at Initial Records when I worked there, like, I don't know, 20 years ago. So yeah, both of them came on board, and we got ready for those shows in April with Russian Circles, and those were our first shows, April 2017. But then as the band started touring more, like when we went to Europe, Nick couldn't go to Europe because of family commitments. So my friend Eric Dino, who used to be in the band Kerosene 454, they were like a DC band I was obsessed with when I was a kid. I asked him to play guitar, and so he did our first 2 European tours, but then the third tour, Nick couldn't do it, Shelly couldn't do it, and Eric couldn't do it. So rather than find other people, you know, like I said, I asked the Coliseum guys. I just decided to do it myself, and it went really well. I kind of think people reacted to it more because it's just me. I think maybe like I don't know. I don't know. You know, maybe it seems more impressive or something, or it just seems different. I heard in Europe, because everyone's so blunt, I heard a lot of like, I thought that was going to be terrible, and I really loved it. So I think we kind of,
that must have been in Germany, right? That
yeah,
comment.
exactly. So it was like a lot of German compliments of kind of like, they didn't know what to expect, but the idea is that it's still like a show. It's not just me playing guitar, not moving around. I'm very physical when I play, and like there's still lights and stuff like that. And I integrated strobe lights that I controlled my feet for the solo stuff, and so it's been going good. And so I'm gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of atmosphere. Like when the one time I saw you was as just you on stage, and there's definitely an atmosphere which I think is important. Like I used to be of the mindset, I just get up there, a bunch of guys in t-shirts and shorts and play. But now I feel like, these days you have to, it's fun and it's interesting to present a full landscape of stuff to people. And I think that that's a very big part of why I think like that live, setting for you is so powerful, is that there is this atmosphere that surrounds the performance,
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to, I think that's I don't know what the word is, like, it's part of our perception of music. I mean, all of us grew up being aware of major artists, and once an artist becomes really big, they can have a stage set, they can have lights that they control, they can have backdrops, they can have video, they can have all this shit. And I love that. I mean, I like, whether it's like the like 8 foot tall Danzig skull drum riser that Chuck Biscuits was on, like the early Danzig shows, or like the Misfits things back then, or or whatever, like even Kiss, like things like that. So I kind of love all that stuff, and that's maybe my biggest the thing that I wish the most out of, if I could be a very successful musician and popular, is to have the finances to do that stuff. I would love to fucking do that, man. Like, I've tried my best. Coliseum did it in the later years. Like, tried hard to make an atmosphere, make it be a vibe and a performance and an event. I mean, I see a lot of bands, especially bands with drum machines, that I think are good, and then I see them play and they're just fucking boring.
Yeah, totally.
They're just like, there's 2 to 5 people standing on stage, and there's nothing interesting, and it's just people just kind of looking down at their shoelaces, and like, it's just not cool to me. Like, I want to see a thing. Like, if someone's going to see the music, it should be an event. And especially when you have a full band with drums and everything, there's a lot to focus on and a lot to see. But with me, I feel like smoke and lights and all that kind of shit is it's fun, and it also hopefully, like you said, creates like an atmosphere when I play. And for me, it's fun because I feel like I step outside of myself. It's part of the stuff I was saying before, where it's nice to not feel like I'm just Joe Schmo standing on stage. Like, I feel like it's aside from my normal personality. I go on stage and I am something different for that period of time, and it's really fun for me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's, I mean, getting into, I think about this stuff a lot, is like the kind of ritualistic, like the act of performing and the act of the crowd, that whole energy transfer, and, almost becoming like this sort of atavistic, version of yourself, or a different, like entity when you're playing live, you know what I mean? I know that sounds like very dramatic and everything, but there's a lot to it. I think the fact that, like, if you're on tour and you're exhausted all day, then you put on whatever you're going to wear on stage, and suddenly you feel energized, and you get on stage and the lights start changing, and you plug into your gear, and it's like ready to go, and you become a different animal, like a different, sort of machine that can execute the set, you know what I mean, and perform, and you have a different feeling, you know what I mean? And it's like, there's that's not to be made light of, I think, and I think that this whole aspect of Fotocrime that you're touching on is a very important realization to have when it comes to, evolving into a different sort of musical entity.
No, I agree. I mean, that's part of the idea with the music, and yeah, like you're saying. I mean, even going on tour, period. Like, there's so much of it that's shitty and, or maybe not shitty, but mind numbing or boring or whatever. But like, you feel like a different person. You're not like a civilian going through your normal day. Like, you're on this mission, and I always feel like kind of weirdly invincible on tour. You know, like
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I feel more confident. I feel more, especially this past tour, what I did when I was playing solo and playing bass for Cripple Black Phoenix. Like, I felt like I was at my absolute peak as a human being. It was weird. I was just like, this is kind of amazing. Like, I'm pushing myself to the limit and I'm feeling great. And it was fucking awesome, and there's never a point when I'm like just wasting time, or there's like, I don't know. I just felt like I was really fully, highly functioning. And then that's nice. And like what you're saying too, is the connection with the audience and the music. And that's something about playing solo that I didn't anticipate and is really amazing, is just how direct of a connection it is. I mean, there's nobody else there but me.
Yeah.
And like, from, maybe even from an ego standpoint, like every eye is on me, and it's pretty fucking wild, man. It was like, I'd never thought about that, never experienced that before. And it was liberating. It felt good. And it felt like this absolute direct connection with the audience in a way I'd never felt before, even though I've been the frontman for bands for a long time. And it was fucking cool. I really, really liked that and appreciated that.
So the first time you performed with just, as a solo entity, that was in Europe, right?
I did a show at home
Okay.
a few days before I went to Europe. So I did one warm-up gig at like a club down the street from my house.
Okay, so now this is the question. How did it feel when you played for the first time alone on stage in Louisville versus the first time you did it by yourself in Europe?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think at home I had a little more like apprehension, of course, because it's like everybody that knows me, and your friends don't think you're cool. They just think you're this person they know. It's like there's no artifice there. And at the same time, I have a really amazing, huge, supportive group of friends, like personal friends and music community people and stuff like that here. So it was a really warm environment. It's like a really small room at this club, like in my neighborhood. I mean, literally at the end of my block. And so it felt really good. Like, it felt nice, and people were very supportive, and it helped me feel prepared for this crazy new thing. And then in Europe, the first show was actually at God, what's the name of the town? Scunthorpe, England, where we practiced for a week. It's like the closest town to where the main Cripple Black Phoenix dude lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that show, like, the fog machine set off the fire alarm during sound check, so I couldn't use the fog machine. And it was my first night playing without a PA behind me, and I just used the monitors, the drum machine and everything, and I was using Cripple Black Phoenix's amps, and it was a fucking, I don't know, just like a total trial by fire. Just like super nervous, felt very uncomfortable. I mean, I still had the lights and all that, but it went well. And so the whole tour was a little bit crazier than the first show, because the first show I had all my equipment and was in a place I was comfortable with, whereas in Europe it was like something totally different every day, and like vastly different stages and stuff like that. And even now, like the show I saw you in Denver, that was my second time going direct with guitar. So now I'm using no amps on stage.
Oh, wow.
So
I didn't realize that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so that's a whole new crazy thing that I'm getting used to. But is really good because I can travel lighter. I'm not bound by amps and weird mixes. And for me, with like so many tracks and drum machine and keyboard and all that stuff, to have the guitar going through the PA integrates the sound more. It was sounding weird sometimes with like guitar amps on stage, but maybe if you were really close to the stage, you were hearing too much guitar, not enough drum machine, and things like that. So now it's all coming out of the same signal path throughout the whole room, and it definitely sounds better.
Wow. You know, I didn't even notice that I mean, I guess because there was backline stuff behind you.
Yeah.
I just assumed you were plugged into one of those amps. Oh,
Well,
that's
if it fooled you, then I worked. Yeah, I mean, like the first show I did, I opened for Jawbox's first show back in Baltimore, and a bunch of friends were there from Baltimore and DC area, like music people, and they didn't know. They thought I was playing through the amps that night. So if it fools a guitar player, then I'm doing okay, you know?
Yeah, that's a trip, man. That's wow, I can't even imagine. But that's like that's the kind of world we live in now, man. It's like all of these things, like even we were talking about atmosphere and stage production, that's all within everyone's grasp right now, is to do things in a way that they want to do them in a relatively inexpensive fashion. You know what I mean? Like these days you can put together a stage rig like that and not have to like spend, thousands of dollars on lighting and programming the lights, and you can run a lot of stuff right off of a laptop these days.
Yeah, I mean, and I've always avoided using the laptop on stage. Like I don't personally like seeing a computer on stage. Like if it's by the drummer, I think it's okay, but like the era you and I come from, like I don't know if you're a fan of the VSS, but like I remember seeing them and like Sonny control all the lights from like a little podium, and that kind of thing, like Ink and Dagger and Botch and all these bands that used lights in a really cool way, like they mostly had other people doing it, but that idea of just like, it's become co-opted now, but D.I.Y. is like, that's integral in my brain. And it's like, I don't want to, I mean, I'm using a drum machine and tracks, so like I'm bound by like, computers to a certain extent, but like I want to have all these things hands on and like create them, and like the lights I have that I'm flying with are like shitty like work lights from Home Depot that I taped up and put gels on, and and then they look like something after all that. And I see music as like an arts and crafts project. I mean, that like designing shirts and making records and all that. I just see it as this whole piece of art. Like when you play live, like how a guitar looks, every fucking little bit of it is like, to me, tactile and real and like all part of the same thing, because we came from punk, whereas like we understood Raymond Pettibone drew Black Flag covers, and we like understood that tactile nature of how it all worked together. And I think that's really important and like really fun to me, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. I mean, that's another thing that's interesting about that too is like how many people that from that sort of DIY scene have gained all these skills to do these things and have turned that into like a business or some sort of like other career that most likely wouldn't have arisen had they not gotten into the DIY, like punk and hardcore scene. You gain all these skills. It's not just like I play guitar. You play guitar, you screen print shirts, you do all this other stuff, and you're involved in like the legwork behind the scenes, like all that stuff. It's like you gain like on the job training by being involved in a DIY band.
Absolutely, man. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's since I was a teenager, basically, that's been my whole life, is like worked at independent labels and now own Shirt Killer and design records and shirts for bands and do my own stuff. And like, yeah, it's pretty amazing that it can become something more. I mean, the thing I think about that is like, if only more punks had become like doctors, it's like, I actually feel like there are like punk rock lawyers out there, but like, I feel like if we had the foresight to really, because there's a million of us that make shirts and that
that's true,
record records and whatever, but like if we had like a punk doctor in every town who you could go pay an affordable price to have health coverage or whatever, like, I think we've done a pretty good job of like having this spread out punk web throughout the world. But then there's certain things that we like didn't fully go into that we would actually probably benefit more from Yeah, I don't know. Like, you can get like a punk rock haircut, of course, and a punk rock tattoo, but like, if I could get like a punk rock open heart transplant, we'd be really in business.
Yeah, totally. So with Fotocrime, what records, what releases do you guys have, or do you have out
Yeah,
to date, and are you available on all the streaming services right now?
I think so. Yeah, I think everything is everywhere. Like, I don't do Spotify, but I do know it's there. Um, so the first record was the Always Hell 7-inch, which was 3 songs. And then the next release was a European release called Always Night, that is 3 new songs on side A and then Always Hell and a remix on side B. That was a 12-inch. Um, and then the third release is the Principle of Pain full length, which I put out in the States, and the label called Golden Antenna put out in Europe. And so that's it so far. And then I'm currently writing and have recorded part of my next album.
And it's going to be a full length, another LP or.
Yeah, that'll be another LP, and that'll come out in spring of next year. I've recorded 4 songs. I've never done this before. I just kind of happened to record a couple songs in London. I was there with some time off, hanging out after tour, and was like feeling this kind of like psychotic post-tour like anxiety of like, you're moving 110 miles an hour, then you just stop. And I was like, I have to do something music related in this week while I'm here.
Yeah.
So I booked a date and recorded the 2 new songs that I've been playing on tour, and then recorded a couple other songs with Jay Robbins when I went up to play that Jawbox show a few weeks ago. And now I'm, writing the rest of the record and putting that all together. I'm going to do a day with Albini,
Oh, wow.
Steve Albini. I'm going to do like live drum tracks with that. So I can do like maybe 3 or 4 songs live with live drums. And then I fly the next day with the tape to Jay's studio in Baltimore and there for a week and do the rest of the stuff. And we're going to try some weird shit there. Like Jay's putting together like a few players. I'm kind of not, well, I wouldn't say I'm obsessed, but I'm really intrigued by that idea of like those records that are kind of like producer made, like PIL album, and like a lot of the Tony Visconti stuff with David Bowie and like Peter Gabriel stuff. He kind of, where like one person kind of orchestrates the music but isn't necessarily playing it, or maybe not even writing it.
Yeah, I think that was that David Bowie Closer. I think that was like almost like a Trent Reznor record. I think that he was kind of behind that whole thing, and Bowie just kind of like layered his thing on top of it.
Exactly. I mean, and apparently the last Bowie record was kind of like that, where they just got these players in and kind of let them do their thing, and he kind of guides it. I know PIL album, I'm spacing on the producer, but like that one, there's like Ginger Baker's on drums and Steve Vai is on guitar, and John Lydon doesn't come in till like the tracks are done basically. And so we're going to do a day of players in the Baltimore and DC area and kind of like come up, have some general ideas and kind of let them do thing, and we'll play with them a little bit, Jay and I will, and then kind of shape it, see if it shapes into songs. So it might be nothing might come of it, or something might, but I really like that idea. It's what like Coliseum always called it, non-songs. Like we would always try to write these non-songs, like not really structured, and we just weren't good at it. I'm not really good at that. Like I really am obsessed with Crime in the City Solution, and their songs are like just very like, I don't know, they're like water, they just kind of move along. Like
there's barely anything there, but there's this like thin like string that kind of links everything together.
Exactly. Yeah. There's like and Nick Cave has gotten into that in the last few records, and I really like that too. Like there might be a little theme they might come back to, but that's usually done by people that have time to be in a studio for a long time and make a record in the studio, and I never have that time. So Coliseum tried to do that a little bit, and we have a couple songs kind of like that, but kind of trying to do that, see what happens with that. So I don't know. I've got like a million ideas, and like we're saying, it was like music is just about the experience and about the seeing what you can do. You know, to me, it's like recording records. I care more about the good time I have making the record than the outcome, if that makes sense. Like I want it to sound great, but like in the end, I think about those times. Like I think about the magic of making the record and like that period of time more than I think about what the songs sound like. So that's kind of what I'm going after and trying to like I said, I feel freed. I don't really give a fuck about what anybody thinks about it. So I really want to try these ideas that I've had. I mean, like one of the fucking new songs that I've already recorded, I played like slap bass on it. So,
That's awesome,
just like things I've never done. I'm like, I like the sound of this. Can I accomplish this? You know, what's it going to be like? So yeah, it's fun. I don't know. So I'm the recording stuff starts in the beginning of September, and I'm like fully in like insane songwriting mode. You know, I've been like working on 10 seconds of a song for 3 days now. It's like I would be, my brain's kind of fried on that right at the moment.
Yeah, man, September's right around the corner.
Yeah, I fucking know. I'm really good at writing songs right at the last second, but since I'm having other people involved, I have to get them the songs beforehand. So I'm kind of freaking out a little bit, like, but I don't know. It'll be fine.
Before we go on, I have to make a correction to what I said earlier. The Bowie record that I was referring to is called Outside, not Closer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's someone, before someone gets excited out there and sends me a DM or something like that. I just wanted to clarify that.
Is that the one is the song called like I'm Afraid of Americans or something like that?
I believe it's on that. Also that I'm Deranged. That
okay.
The one from the Lost Highway soundtrack.
Oh, nice. Yes.
And yeah, it's like a very Reznor-esque like vibe to it with a lot of break beats and everything. And then some of my favorite Bowie like vocal lines are on that record.
That's cool. I should revisit that record. I listened to like those songs when they were out, but I've never gone back to it.
Yeah, it's one of those records that I'm sure it sold like 1 million copies, but it's like
right.
one of those records that people, they're not go-to, albums for a lot of people from his catalog, but those later years had some good stuff on it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think that last record was amazing.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I think, there's a lot of great stuff.
Yeah. It made me sad. I remember like I never met the guy. I don't know him, but when I found out that he passed away, I was like, it hit me kind of hard. It kind of bummed me out for the whole day, really. Absolutely,
man. I'll tell you when Iggy Pop dies, I think like part of my soul will die. I don't know. Like he feels like he's like the whatever, like, he's like almost ground zero of punk, he's like so much the like epicenter of so many things I love, and I love his music so much. I maybe like his music. I maybe listen to records of his more now than I ever have in my life. And like, yeah, I mean, obviously, we're all going to go sooner or later, but like, he feels like one that is inevitable and will just be crushing. I don't know.
Yeah. And, and also just to, he's also someone who never really seem to give a fuck about, whether or not people liked his music either. You know what I mean?
No.
And there's so many. If you look at his catalog, it's tremendous. It's huge, and there's like
it is
records that you don't even think about that weren't maybe not as successful, but had stuff on there where he was definitely pushing it, and that kind of fits in what you were saying about like how you're trying new things all the time, and I always felt like Iggy was never afraid to try new things, like and it's something I've always admired about. I mean, I'm not a fan of every record, but the overall body of work is something that's probably, just by the sheer volume of it, is something that is like in my like small sphere of respect for music, for really, really superlative, artists. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable what all he's done and the impact it made. And he's kind of like I was saying too, like I don't I was thinking the other day, like he's not really a songwriter. I mean, I think he writes lyrics, but like he's a guy that someone else usually guides the music to a record. And that's always interesting to me too, like how many different things he's done. And I don't know, I've been kind of obsessed with the New Values record recently, like kind of revisiting it and kind of relearning it because I bought it 20 years ago and like dismissed it. And I'm like really pumped on that record right now. And it's interesting. And like this guy, Scott Thurston, wrote most of the music on that. And like, I don't know, it's really wild to me. Like artists, very singular artists who don't write their own music, like
Yeah.
that's kind of fucking mind blowing. And I know there are a lot of people like that, like singers. And it's really interesting to see their trajectory. And Iggy's, like, even though it always has that very Iggy thing about it, but there's like this crazy wide variety of music. So it's fucking cool.
Yeah, he just sort of injects his personality into the thing, and it's like this intangible substance that gets laid on the top of everything, and it's like, it's funny you mentioned that because like I said, we just finished recording, and not to, to deflect back to myself on this thing, but it's like, but we were in that mode, that analytical mode of tracking and like. The stuff that we try to do has a lot of, technical sort of elements to it. And I just remember sitting in the studio and listening to like the rhythm guitars and the drums. And I'm like, there's like where's like at that point you're at this thing of like, where's the personality of this fucking song? You know what I mean? Because It's like all you're hearing is like a click track and like these drums and like this pick attack on the guitars. And I'm just like when does that actual intangible thing get laid into the music where it just couldn't be anybody? You know what I mean? And that's what I think, like Iggy, like if you take him out of the mix, it's like maybe except for the Stooges were all personality and attitude and everything. But like on some of the records, which were put together in the studio with different, musicians, studio players, it's like, it's not until he steps in. And I think the same to be said for David Bowie too. That it's a Bowie or an Iggy song. It becomes their song when they lay in that personality, that intangible, like viscous material that they put in there, that glues everything together.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that is voice. I mean, if you're talking about your songs, like once your voice comes into it, that's when it makes it absolutely your music. And that's kind of how I felt for a long time. Like that was something that we always kind of thought about Coliseum music is like, well, is this a Coliseum song? Like all these different things. And eventually I was like, if I'm singing on it, it's a Coliseum song. Right. And that's how I feel about Fotocrime. I'm like, if I sing on it, it's me. Like I'm making all this music and all these sounds, whether it comes from a guitar or a bass or a keyboard or whatever. But when my voice is on it, that's 100% me. And that's what makes this my song. It's kind of why I've never done an instrumental song. Like, I don't know, like I'm, I feel like the voice is, for me personally, what generally makes music personal and connected in a human way.
Yeah, I mean that's the personality, and that's like the thing that isn't, the voice isn't necessarily like a technical instrument in a lot of ways. It's
exactly.
I mean, you can be one of these singers who can hit all these notes and execute everything perfectly, but the guys that we're talking about, Iggy, David Bowie, Nick Cave, that's not who they are. They have this loose personality that they inject into the songs, and that's ultimately what I think most people respond to is that, the vibe, like the feelings, the emotion, that kind of impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do respect people like Iggy or whoever who have that, whatever that cadence is in their voice, they bring it to every song. Like, maybe I do it in my music, but it's just because it's me, I can't see it, but I like Iggy is a perfect example where like from the first song, like the first Stooges song, and he does different things throughout the years, but essentially he's always the same, and that's cool to me. Like that's what makes a great singer. And I always am like, fuck, how do I always be me and not just be me and different characters or me injecting into a different song. Like, and maybe it is always me, but like I love that. I love when you can absolutely hear that voice and know who that person is. I mean, that's the ultimate. That's the ideal as a singer, I think.
Yeah, totally, man. That's like, that's the goal.
Yeah.
So now, as far as like people, like, finding you online, like listening to music, do you have Bandcamp and all that sort of stuff? You want to give everyone a rundown on like, where they can learn about tour dates, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's Fotocrime.com, which is, has links to everything applicable, has tour dates and all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, the Bandcamp is to me like the preferred source for the music. You can order the records there and all that. And so that's it. Yeah, fotocrime.bandcamp.com. It's FOTO. And yeah, that's it. Those are the spots, I think, and it's everywhere else. I'm bad about social media and all that kind of shit, but all that stuff exists. It's just not really something I care too much about.
Now, aside, I know you got recording around the corner, but later in the year, do you got any tour plans or any live stuff coming up after that?
I'm just playing a few shows. I'm playing a couple shows in August. I'm playing, let's see, August 10th, I'm playing here in Louisville at a club called Kaiju, and the 11th, I'm playing at the Empty Bottle in Chicago. And that's all I have planned. I'm kind of mainly focusing on trying to have tours happening for next year when the album comes out. But yeah, hopefully some other things will pop up, but I'm mainly focusing on the songwriting for now.
Are you going to continue, at least for the foreseeable future, as just a solo entity, or do you see yourself at some point bringing back, a bass player or drummer or that kind of thing?
It honestly depends on the logistics and the finances. I mean, I don't see the band immediately jumping into some kind of scenario where we're getting paid a lot more money. But if we were, then yes. I mean, it's honestly, it's a financial decision, a logistical decision, which is part of the thing with punk rock. Economy, yeah. Like the economy is part of the art. So, for it to be a new band that doesn't get paid a lot and scheduling is hard and all that kind of stuff, it just makes sense for it to be me, and people respond to it well. So I think it'll just be whatever. And I honestly kind of like the idea that you don't know what you'll get. One day you might see these people and you don't know who else might be on stage with me. I mean, I've thought about having a keyboard player instead of a second guitar player, or who knows? Cool. I mean, I've thought about just singing, I mean, so I think we'll just see what happens. And I like that idea of it ever changing, but yeah, certainly the plan for now is solo. So, which I like. I mean, rolling solo is pretty fucking incredible.
Yeah, I've always fantasized about doing something like that, honestly. And,
yeah, man.
It's that's cool. That's great. One of the are you familiar with the band Six Finger Satellite?
Yes. Yeah.
Back in the day, that was a band that you never knew what you were going to get when you went to go see them, because I
never saw them.
Well, when I lived in Boston in the '90s, they were based in Providence, so they would play relatively frequently up in Boston, and I saw them maybe 3, 4, 5. About 5 times maybe, opening for the Jesus Lizard one time, and then a bunch of times on their own headlining. And literally one time I saw them, it was the singer, 2 guys playing Moog, and a drum machine. Then another time it was like the full band, and then another time I saw them, there were like 3 guitar players on stage, and like the singer was playing synths and singing, and it was like all different every single time.
Yeah.
And I think that's
exciting.
Cool. That's real exciting. Yeah.
But I love that. I mean, I love bands that I listen to that some records are drum machines, some aren't. And I'm always kind of like, is this real or not? And yeah, I like that idea, man. And so, yeah, I think I may explore that more in the future. That's exciting. I did not know that about Six Finger Satellite. I thought they were always kind of like a standard band setup.
Nah, I mean, yeah, I've seen so many different iterations of that band, and even their records have a lot of different, sounds and different sort of like vibes from record to record.
That's awesome.
Yeah, them and Green Magnet School, I thought were great bands from that era.
I don't know Green Magnet School.
Oh man, there's a record if you can find it on Sub Pop called Blood Music, and
okay.
I play that on my show sometimes, tracks off of that record. Hopefully other people catch on to it. And they're like, early 90s, not really like a sub pop band, like referencing like more krautrock type stuff, but with like a noise rock vibe to it,
Nice.
Yeah, very, very cool band. And,
okay, I'll check it out. That's awesome.
But thanks for your giving me so much of your time this evening. I appreciate it. And
absolutely, always a pleasure.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio weekly podcast. Tune in next week and see what we have in store for you. The show is available on all streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, etc. Also, be sure to check out Gimme Radio, streaming on the web, iOS, or Android, for one of the best metal communities, exclusive merch, interviews with artists, and so much more. I'll catch you guys next week. Take care.